They tell us that civilization began 5,000 years ago, that before the pyramids, before the first cities, humanity was little more than wandering tribes beneath a silent sky. Yet scattered across this planet are monuments that defy that story, monuments that whisper of something older, deeper, and infinitely stranger. From the deserts of Turkey to the jungles of Cambodia, from the plateaus of Peru to the megalithic coasts of France, each bears the same silent signature: geometry. Angles, circles, ratios, mathematics carved into stone, and the precision of these works is so exact, so impossibly advanced, that even today we cannot fully explain how or why they were built. What were these people measuring? Why align their temples and tombs with the rising of distant stars? Why carve rock with a precision that rivals our machines? The more we look, the more we find a pattern, numbers and alignments that seem to echo a single ancient understanding, that mathematics is not a human invention, but a universal truth. Across the world, this truth is expressed again and again. The golden ratio woven into temples that predate writing, pi encoded in the very shape of pyramids, perfect north-south alignments achieved thousands of years before the magnetic compass was ever conceived. It is as if these builders possessed not only a mastery of stone, but of the cosmos itself. And so the question grows darker. Did humanity truly begin from nothing, or are we living in the shadow of forgotten knowledge? If you find yourself drawn to questions like these, to the spaces between science and mystery, then stay with me. You're not alone. Thousands of minds across time have looked up at the stars and wondered the same thing. Who taught the ancients to think in numbers so vast? Because the deeper we look into these ruins, the less they resemble the primitive experiments of early man, and the more they resemble the deliberate constructions of mathematicians, astronomers, and engineers.
Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, was built with celestial alignments so precise they track the precession of the stars.
The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes constants of our planet's dimensions with microscopic tolerances. Newgrange in Ireland channels sunlight through a narrow passage to illuminate a single stone only once each year, on the winter solstice, the rebirth of the sun. And in Greece, a corroded bronze mechanism recovered from a shipwreck still tracks lunar cycles, with a complexity unmatched for nearly 2,000 years. Each of these structures seems to speak a language of order, an architecture of pure thought. And yet, every one of them raises the same impossible question: how? How did early civilizations, supposedly bound by stone tools and muscle, create works of such precision? How did they calculate alignments to celestial bodies invisible for centuries at a time? How did they move and fit stones weighing hundreds of tons, shaping them to fractions of an inch without iron, steel, or modern mathematics? To explain it, we must either accept that these people were far more advanced than we have been told, or that they were inheritors of something older still. Civilization, after all, may not be a straight line. It may rise and fall in cycles like the stars themselves. Knowledge may be born, forgotten, and reborn again. And perhaps, in the dust of the ages, we are only now rediscovering what our ancestors already knew, that the universe speaks in the language of numbers, and that geometry is its memory. Some of the sites we'll explore in this journey are carved from the living bedrock of mountains. Others are aligned to constellations that no longer rise where they once did. Each bears evidence of careful observation, astronomical precision, and geometric mastery that should have been impossible for its time. But perhaps impossibility is only the boundary between what we think we know and what we have yet to remember. If you're new to Frontiers of Infinity, this is where our exploration begins, at the edges of reason, where history becomes myth and mathematics becomes something sacred. If you wish to see how deep this mystery goes, I invite you to stay. There are many more worlds waiting in the stones. Because the ancients may not have left behind words, but they did leave us equations, structures that reveal the same constants that govern the stars, the planets, and even the geometry of life itself. From the symmetry of spirals in nature to the proportions of their temples, the message seems the same. The universe is not chaos, but code. Every monument we'll visit is a cipher in that code. Each one holds fragments of an older logic, one that measured time not in years, but in cycles of the heavens. And when we decode those patterns, we find the same language spoken across the earth. This is what makes the mystery so haunting, that people who never met, separated by oceans and by thousands of years, somehow shared a common mathematics. They built in the same proportions, they tracked the same stars, they used the same sacred numbers. Coincidence or continuity?
Perhaps the builders of these monuments belonged to cultures we've never known, keepers of knowledge that predates recorded history. Or perhaps they were simply human beings who looked at the sky with the same wonder we do, and through that wonder touched something eternal. Either way, these works endure not as relics, but as reminders that intelligence is not a privilege of the present, but a thread woven through the ages. And the more we understand their geometry, the more we begin to glimpse what they may have seen, a universe built on pattern, ratio, and rhythm.
Over the next 14 chapters, we will travel across 10 ancient sites and 5 continents, uncovering the mathematical fingerprints left by civilizations long vanished. We'll ask how they built, what they knew, and why they aligned their world to the stars. And by the end, perhaps we will begin to see not just how advanced they were, but how much of their knowledge may still live within us. So let us begin our descent into the oldest mystery of all, the moment when humanity first measured the heavens. Our journey starts 12,000 years ago on a limestone hill in southeastern Turkey, where hunter-gatherers built the first known temple to the stars.
Gobekli Tepe.
12,000 years ago, long before the pharaohs, before writing, before the first city walls ever rose from the earth, a group of hunter-gatherers gathered on a barren limestone hill in what is now southeastern Turkey. They carried no metal, no wheels, and no beasts of burden. Yet what they built would rewrite everything we thought we knew about human history. Gobekli Tepe, a name that until recently meant nothing, a mound of stone and dust overlooked by shepherds for centuries, assumed to be nothing more than an ancient cemetery. But beneath that hill lay a secret, rings of towering pillars carved with precision and art that should not have existed in the 10th millennium BCE. It was unearthed in 1994 by Klaus Schmidt, who quickly realized that he had found the world's oldest known temple. What shocked him was not simply its age, but its sophistication. The site predates agriculture, pottery, and even permanent settlement. Civilization, we were told, was born from farming. Yet here, long before the plow, humans raised megaliths that weigh 20 tons each. The pillars form perfect circles, each anchored into carefully leveled bedrock. Some stand more than 5 meters tall. 2 central monoliths dominate every ring, facing one another like sentinels frozen mid-dialogue. Their surfaces are smooth, their edges straight, and they are carved with reliefs of animals, foxes, vultures, lions, each etched so deeply and with such anatomical accuracy that even modern sculptors marvel at the skill. There are no signs of domestic life within the site, no hearths, no houses, no trash. Gobekli Tepe was not a village, it was a sanctuary, and whoever built it did so not to survive, but to worship.
Yet what exactly were they worshipping?
The answer may lie in the sky above them. Some of the pillars appear to mark celestial alignments, particularly with Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens. Around 9600 BCE, the star would have first become visible from that latitude after millennia of absence. To the people of Gobekli Tepe, its return could have signified renewal, the rebirth of light itself after an age of cold. Their carvings suggest constellations, their geometry suggests observation, and their organization suggests planning across generations. This was not the work of random tribes. It was the coordinated effort of hundreds of people who understood measurement, symmetry, and the movement of the heavens. Imagine the mathematics required to lay out circles with radii that remain constant within centimeters, carved into bedrock without metal tools. Imagine quarrying and moving pillars weighing as much as a modern semi-truck across uneven terrain, raising them upright without cranes, pulleys, or wheels. Even conservative estimates imply a social structure far more complex than wandering bands of foragers. Someone had to design, someone had to direct, and someone had to motivate, through faith, through ritual, or through knowledge that the sky itself demanded replication on Earth. The site contains patterns that repeat from circle to circle, suggesting a single architectural plan. Distances between enclosures reveal geometric relationships, ratios, diagonals, alignments to true north, all executed with eerie consistency. Modern surveys using ground-penetrating radar have revealed that what has been excavated, barely 5%, is only the beginning. At least 20 more enclosures lie buried beneath the hill, still untouched, waiting. And then comes the most haunting fact of all. The people who built Gobekli Tepe buried it. Sometime around 8000 BCE, they deliberately filled their masterpiece with debris, sealing the circles under tons of soil and stone, as if to hide them from time. No flood, no collapse. Deliberate burial, systematic and thorough. It was an act of closure, perhaps ritual, perhaps fear. But why would a culture expend such unimaginable labor only to erase its own creation? Some researchers suggest that the site marks the end of an era, the moment humanity transitioned from a world of sky worshippers to one of farmers and kings. Others whisper of catastrophe, the Younger Dryas event, a climatic upheaval that brought sudden cold and chaos to the earth. Perhaps Gobekli Tepe was entombed not to preserve it, but to protect something far older, a memory or a warning. Whatever the reason, the knowledge embedded in these stones did not die. Less than 1,000 kilometers away and thousands of years later, we find temples and tombs echoing the same orientations, the same animal symbols, the same obsession with the heavens. It is as if the blueprint of Gobekli Tepe spread like a spark, igniting the birth of civilization itself. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Indus to the Andes, the same motifs reappear. Circles, pillars, the marriage of sky and stone. To observe the cosmos with such fidelity would have required generations of record-keeping. Without writing, that knowledge had to be carried in memory, encoded in myth, embedded in ritual. Each pillar at Gobekli Tepe may have been more than a stone. It may have been a data point in a vast oral equation, a living calendar of the sky. When modern astronomers map the positions implied by the carvings, they find correlations not only with Sirius, but with constellations that mark the solstices and equinoxes of that ancient age. The builders may have understood the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the stars' positions over thousands of years. That cycle, 26,000 years long, is one of the most profound motions in the cosmos. To have even suspected it implies observation across centuries. Gobekli Tepe, then, is not merely old. It is an intellectual fossil, the earliest known evidence of the human mind reaching beyond survival to seek pattern in the infinite. It stands as proof that intelligence does not emerge suddenly from agriculture or empire. It flowers wherever wonder does. We look upon these stones and see our ancestors. But perhaps what we are truly seeing is ourselves, our eternal compulsion to understand, to measure, to build meaning into the void. Gobekli Tepe is the first whisper of that impulse made manifest. It is where architecture becomes astronomy, where myth becomes mathematics, where humanity first looked at the stars and decided to mirror them in stone. As we move forward in this journey, each site will build upon this revelation. Each will show how the same geometry resurfaced across continents, as if the universe itself were teaching us its language again and again. Gobekli Tepe is not just the beginning of architecture, it is the beginning of memory. And from this hill of buried circles, a question still echoes through 12 millennia of silence. What did they see? that made them build the heavens on earth. On the edge of the desert, beneath the unblinking Egyptian sun, stands a monument that seems less built than engineered by something beyond time. The Great Pyramid of Giza. A mountain of stone so vast, so mathematically precise, that even after 4,500 years, its perfection defies explanation. It is not simply a tomb or a temple. It is a theorem, written in limestone, sealed in silence. It was built, they say, for Pharaoh Khufu, around 2560 BCE. Yet no inscription inside its walls names him. No hieroglyphs proclaim ownership. Its builders left no plans, no records, no diagrams, and yet what remains is a structure of such accuracy that it still humbles modern architects. When surveyors first measured its base, they discovered that the sides are aligned to true north within 3/60ths of a degree, an error so small that the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, built 45 centuries later, was less precise. The foundation deviates in level by less than 2 centimeters across a base of 230 meters. The slope of its sides, 51.8 degrees, encodes both pi and the golden ratio. The ratio between its height and its perimeter corresponds almost perfectly to the relationship between a circle's radius and its circumference. No natural process creates such geometry. This was deliberate. The question is why? Some say it was aesthetic, a coincidence of practical design. Others believe it was symbolic, the ancient Egyptians' way of harmonizing heaven and earth. But there is another possibility, that the builders possessed a mathematical understanding of proportions so advanced it borders on the scientific. They may not have written equations, but they expressed them in stone. The pyramid is a model of the Earth itself. Scaled at 1 to 43,200, its perimeter represents the planet's circumference. Even its height, when multiplied by that same ratio, equals the Earth's polar radius. A coincidence, perhaps, or an indication that the ancient Egyptians knew more of their world than history allows. 2.5 million limestone blocks form its body, each weighing between 2 and 80 tons. Some of the granite beams in the king's chamber weigh as much as a diesel locomotive and were hauled from Aswan, nearly 500 miles away. They were lifted, positioned, and aligned so precisely that the joints between them are thinner than a human fingernail. The mortar used between casing stones is so fine, it's nearly molecular. When modern engineers study the remains, they find tolerances within fractions of a millimeter, accuracy far beyond what copper chisels and stone hammers should have been capable of. How, then, was it done? The ramp theories multiply: straight ramps, spiral ramps, internal ramps, yet none fully explain the logistics. A straight ramp would have required more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral would have obscured alignment. An internal ramp is elegant but unproven. The truth, like the pyramid's heart, remains sealed.
Inside, the geometry continues to astonish. The descending passage is aligned to the ancient pole star, Thuban, with an accuracy of just 3 arc minutes. The shafts from the king's chamber point directly toward the constellations of Orion and Sirius, Osiris and Isis, the divine pair. To the Egyptians, the stars of Orion's belt represented the cosmic gateway through which the soul of the king would ascend. The Great Pyramid, then, was not merely a tomb. It was a resurrection machine, a map of the heavens designed to launch the dead into eternity.
But beneath the myth, there lies mathematics. To align a structure of such scale to the stars requires an understanding of precession, the slow drift of Earth's axis over 26,000 years. Without modern instruments, how could they have known? Perhaps they did not calculate it as we would, but observed it, generation after generation, century after century, until the sky itself revealed its pattern. This was a civilization obsessed with order. The Nile's floods, the movements of the stars, the geometry of the temples, all bound by cycles and proportion. To the Egyptians, mathematics was not abstract, it was divine. The gods themselves were geometry made manifest. Ra, the sun, was the circle. Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance, was the line, and Khnum, the creator, shaped existence upon his potter's wheel, a metaphor for the spinning of the cosmos itself. The Great Pyramid unites them all. It is the horizon frozen in form, where earth meets sky, where the finite touches the infinite. Its very name in the ancient tongue meant the horizon of Khufu. And perhaps that was not just poetry, but physics. Modern scans of the structure, using cosmic ray muon tomography, have revealed hidden voids and corridors never before seen. One, above the Grand Gallery, stretches 30 meters long and remains unexplored. No one knows its purpose: a relieving chamber, a sealed repository, or something else entirely. It is as if the pyramid still guards its final equation. Some researchers point to the recurring ratios, the golden mean, the relation between the square and the circle, and suggest that the builders encoded universal constants. Others argue this was unintentional, an artifact of practical design. Yet it feels unlikely that such precision could arise by chance again and again. The Egyptian architects, working under the eye of priests and astronomers, may have been recording the very structure of the cosmos, the relationships between time, light, and measure. To them, geometry was sacred because it mirrored the order of creation. Even its orientation tells a story. The pyramid's sides face the cardinal directions with uncanny exactness: north, south, east, west, but its alignment corresponds not to the magnetic pole which drifts, but to true geographic north. To find it, one must observe the rotation of the heavens and bisect the angle traced by circumpolar stars. This method, though possible, demands a level of observational astronomy so refined it borders on the miraculous. Every measure of the Great Pyramid reveals another layer of impossible knowledge. Its height, when multiplied by 10 to the 9th power, equals almost exactly the distance between Earth and the Sun. Its base perimeter, divided by twice its height, equals pi to 3 decimal places. The King's Chamber dimensions reflect the golden ratio, and the ratio of the base to the height equals the proportion of the Earth's hemisphere to its radius. The monument stands at the precise center of Earth's landmass, equidistant from the North Pole and the equator, and from the eastern and western extremes of the continents, all of which could perhaps be coincidence. But too many coincidences become a pattern. If Gobekli Tepe was the first spark of geometry, the moment humanity looked upward, then the Great Pyramid is geometry perfected. It is the mind of ancient man made eternal. Whether it was a tomb, an observatory, or a monument to the mathematics of creation itself, its message remains clear: that knowledge, once achieved, can be written into stone so perfectly that it outlives language, empire, and even memory. In its shadow, time itself seems to pause. The desert wind moves, but the pyramid endures, still facing true north, still reflecting the golden proportions, still defying every limit of its age. A message in geometry whispered across 45 centuries. We were not as primitive as you think. And so the mystery deepens. If Egypt's engineers achieved this level of perfection in 2500 BCE, where did they learn it? Was it the culmination of thousands of years of accumulated sky watching? Or the faint echo of something even older passed down from a forgotten world? In the next chapter, we will leave the deserts of Egypt for the green hills of Ireland, where another monument waits, smaller in scale, but equally bound to the heavens. A structure that captures not the stars, but the light of the sun itself. Newgrange, the tomb that glows with the rebirth of the year. Across the emerald fields of Ireland, in a gentle bend of the River Boyne, lies a mound of earth and stone that predates the Great Pyramid by half a millennium. Its shape is humble from afar, a rounded hill wrapped in grass and quartz. But within its ancient heart, light itself performs a miracle. For just 17 minutes each year, at the exact moment of the winter solstice, the rising sun pierces its entrance and travels 60 feet through a narrow stone corridor, illuminating a chamber that has waited in darkness for 5,000 years. This is Newgrange, a tomb that marks the death of winter and the rebirth of the sun. It was built around 3200 BCE at a time when metal was unknown and writing did not yet exist in Europe. Yet its builders possessed knowledge so precise, so astronomically exact, that the monument still functions flawlessly after 50 centuries. The alignment of its passage, its angle, and even the height of its narrow roof box are tuned to the horizon with mathematical perfection. When Professor M.J. O'Kelly first witnessed the solstice light enter the chamber in 1967, he realized he was standing inside the oldest surviving solar observatory on Earth. Newgrange belongs to the same Neolithic world that raised Stonehenge and Carnac, but it surpasses them in subtlety. Its design unites architecture, astronomy, and ritual in one breathtaking act of geometry. The mound itself spans 85 meters across, containing nearly 200,000 tons of earth and stone. 97 great curbstones form its base, many carved with spirals, lozenges, and circles. The great entrance stone, etched with an intricate triple spiral, guards the doorway like a code. No two spirals are alike. Some turn clockwise, others counterclockwise, some intertwine. Scholars have proposed meanings, solar cycles, lunar phases, the endless rotation of time, yet none fully explain the complexity. Perhaps they were more than symbols. Perhaps they were mathematics in motion, a language of pattern designed to preserve what could not be written. The builders of Newgrange understood more than the path of the sun. They understood the tilt of the Earth's axis and the slow drift of time. To align the passage to the solstice sunrise required long observation, decades of watching the sun's motion along the horizon, year after year, to determine the point of its return. They calculated the angle of the passage to match the sun's elevation at this latitude, 24.5 degrees, adjusting for the slight rise of the distant hills. Over a distance of 60 feet, their error margin is less than 1 degree. Even modern engineers with lasers and satellites marvel that such precision could be achieved with nothing more than wood, stone, and sight. The light that enters Newgrange is not random sunlight. It is deliberate, measured light, a shaft that travels along a precise trajectory, ascending through the darkness like a golden thread. For the rest of the year, the chamber is silent and black. But on the morning of the solstice, the first ray touches the floor, creeps forward, and climbs the back wall to strike a stone basin at the center of the chamber. A ritual heart illuminated for less than 20 minutes before the light withdraws again into shadow. 5,000 winters have passed, and still the light returns, as if honoring an agreement older than civilization. The message is unmistakable, that life conquers death, that the cycle of darkness will always yield to dawn. It is the geometry of hope. And yet, this was not the work of a single generation. To design, build, and test such alignments requires not only patience, but inheritance. Knowledge of this kind must be passed down, carefully, precisely, through ritual or oral tradition. The builders of Newgrange were farmers, but their understanding of time reveals astronomers. Their engineering of the corbelled roof, layered stone upon stone in a narrowing spiral until it closes at the top, has kept the chamber dry for over 5,000 years. Not a single drop of water has ever entered. To achieve this, they used mathematics of proportion and curvature that would not be rediscovered in Europe for millennia. Even the stones themselves are not local. The gleaming white quartz that forms the mound's facade was brought from the Wicklow Mountains, over 50 miles away. Dark granite stones from the Mournes to the north were also carried here, transported along rivers and over land with means we can only guess at. Each piece was chosen, positioned, and balanced, its weight distributed with an engineer's instinct. Newgrange is not just a tomb. It is a living equation of mass, light, and time. But who were the people who built it? No names remain. No kings or priests are buried within. Only the cremated remains of a few individuals were found, 5 in total, placed in stone basins as if they too were offerings to the cycle of rebirth. Some speculate they were astronomer priests, keepers of the calendar, chosen to rest where the sun would find them each year. Others see in the triple spiral the echo of something older still, a symbol of eternity, rebirth, and the triad of creation itself. Across the valley, other mounds stand, Noth and Douth, each aligned to different celestial events. Together they form a cosmic complex, a Neolithic observatory tracking the interplay of solar and lunar cycles. Noth is oriented to the equinoxes, Douth to the winter sunset. The builders of the Boyne Valley were mapping the heavens across the land, encoding the motions of the sky into earth and stone. This required not only observation, but geometry, an understanding of arcs, angles, and ratios. The distances between the monuments even correspond to astronomical periods. The 19-year Metonic cycle, the time it takes for the sun and moon to realign in the same position in the sky. These were farmers who had become mathematicians by necessity, reading the heavens to know when to sow, when to harvest, and when to celebrate the eternal return of light. Some researchers believe they may have also been aware of precession, the slow, almost imperceptible wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the position of the solstice sunrise over thousands of years. If true, this would mean the builders of Newgrange possessed a scale of time that stretches beyond human life, a civilization measuring eternity itself. Even now, as the world outside changes, the light inside Newgrange keeps its appointment. The earth tilts, the stars drift, but the sun still finds its mark through that narrow roof box. Modern visitors who win the lottery to stand inside on the solstice describe the same sensation. A presence not spiritual but mathematical. The realization that people, 5,000 years ago, could think in such grand terms, aligning their mortality with the mechanics of the cosmos. In that moment, Newgrange becomes something greater than architecture. It becomes an equation of faith, not in gods, but in order. The belief that light, time, and geometry are the same eternal truth. If Gobekli Tepe was the birth of wonder and the Great Pyramid the perfection of form, then Newgrange is the moment when humanity learned to merge the two, to shape time itself into architecture. The tomb is both a clock and a promise. It tells us that we have always known, deep down, that darkness is temporary and that knowledge, like sunlight, will always find its way home. And when the solstice sun withdraws and the chamber falls silent once more, the message lingers in the dark stones. Everything dies, but nothing ends. Every shadow is only the waiting shape of the light to come. Along the windswept coast of Brittany in western France, an ocean of stone stretches toward the horizon. Nearly 3,000 granite monoliths, some standing upright, others leaning with the slow surrender of centuries. They are known as the Carnac stones, a riddle in plain sight. Rows of standing stones arranged with such precision and purpose that they transform the landscape into an ancient equation. No walls, no roofs, no writing, just geometry on a colossal scale. The stones of Carnac predate the pyramids by 1,000 years. Their origins vanish into the Neolithic twilight, sometime between 4,800 and 3,300 BCE. And though the sea has crept closer and the soil has shifted, their alignments endure, kilometer after kilometer of parallel rows converging toward the rising sun. Circles, dolmens, tumuli, thousands of megaliths arranged in patterns so vast they can only be seen from above. To walk among them is to stand inside the skeleton of forgotten knowledge. For centuries, local legends tried to explain them. Some said they were Roman soldiers turned to stone by Merlin. Others believed they marked a battlefield frozen in time. But when archaeologists began to measure their layout, the pattern emerged. These were not random monuments. They were designed. The stones are placed with an accuracy that defies chance. In some alignments, the deviations from perfect straightness are less than a single degree over hundreds of meters. The spacing between stones is consistent. Their orientation matches solar and lunar paths. Some lines track the midsummer sunrise, others mark the setting of the moon during its extreme declinations in the 18.6-year cycle known as the lunar standstill. Whoever built Carnac understood the sky not as myth, but as mathematics. Each of the great alignments, Menek, Camario, and Kerlescan, appears to serve a specific astronomical function. The rows of Menek, the oldest, point directly toward the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the longest day of the year. At the opposite end, a large circular enclosure mirrors that same alignment, as though framing the light of midsummer like a colossal lens. The Camario alignment, slightly younger, appears to follow the setting of the moon during the major lunar standstill, a phenomenon that repeats only once every generation. To identify and encode such a cycle requires observation over decades, proof of an unbroken intellectual tradition. And yet, there are no records, no inscriptions, no surviving symbols to tell us what these stones meant. Were they a calendar, a place of initiation, a temple to the movements of heaven? Or all of these at once? Each stone was quarried from local granite, weighing up to 80 tons. Some were dragged from several kilometers away, their surfaces roughly shaped but consistently upright, suggesting a deliberate standard of height and spacing. The act of moving and aligning such stones would have required hundreds of workers, ropes, rollers, and levers, and most importantly, leadership. To coordinate the placement of thousands of megaliths across more than 4 kilometers of terrain demands not only manpower, but mathematics. Distances had to be measured, angles preserved, elevations compensated for curvature and slope. It is architecture, yes, but it is also surveying on a monumental scale. What makes Carnac unique is its fusion of engineering and landscape. Unlike pyramids or temples which rise in defiance of the earth, Carnac extends the earth's own geometry. It traces invisible lines, the paths of the sun, the sweep of the moon, onto the land itself. It is as though the builders sought to turn the earth into a working model of the cosmos. Recent studies using GPS and satellite imagery have revealed a sophistication once unimagined. Certain alignments converge toward points corresponding to the positions of the solstice sun over nearby hills. Others trace arcs that, when mapped, form perfect geometric relationships. Isosceles triangles, circles, and ratios that recur throughout later European megalithic architecture. The builders of Carnac were not simply stacking stones, they were drawing geometry across miles of terrain. Some researchers suggest the site may have functioned as a vast observatory, a laboratory of timekeeping in an age before writing. By tracking where the first rays of sunrise or moonrise struck specific stones, they could mark the seasons, predict eclipses, and synchronize rituals to the rhythm of the heavens. Such knowledge would have been vital for survival, guiding agriculture, navigation, and ceremony alike. But the scale of Carnac hints at something more profound. This was not mere practicality. It was devotion. A culture willing to spend generations moving mountains of stone for reasons that go beyond necessity. These alignments were built not only to measure the heavens, but to speak with them. Each stone, a voice. Each row, a line in an ancient hymn. The people who raised them are gone, their language lost, their myths erased. Yet their geometry remains, still tracing the paths of celestial motion with unwavering precision. As the centuries passed, the Atlantic winds buried them in grass and legend. Churches were later built on nearby mounds, as if Christianity instinctively claimed the power that still radiated from the stones. But even now, long after their builders vanished, the patterns persist. The deeper mystery lies not only in how they built it, but in why the same mathematics appears elsewhere, across continents, among cultures that never met. The geometry of Carnac echoes in Britain's Avebury and Stonehenge, in Portugal's Almendres Cromlech, even in distant Malta. The same proportions, the same solar and lunar symmetries. It is as if Europe's Neolithic peoples shared a common geometry, a language of number and shape carried not by empire, but by memory.
Carnac may have been their genesis point, a node in a forgotten network of prehistoric science. If so, then these stones are not the ruins of superstition, but the remnants of Europe's first intellectual revolution.
And yet, to stand among them today is to feel something else entirely, not the cold precision of calculation, but the pulse of awe. The silence between the stones hums with the same question that has haunted every age since. How did they know? How did people without writing, metal, or machines design a monument that captures the solar year and the lunar cycle with such accuracy? Were they simply keen observers of the heavens, or inheritors of a much older tradition, one passed down from cultures that vanished at the end of the Ice Age? The answer, if it exists, remains locked within the stones themselves. Time and weather have softened their edges, but not their alignment. They still point patiently toward the same horizons as though waiting for us to notice. Carnac is Europe's forgotten geometry, a place where the earth, the sky, and the human mind first entered into a dialogue of design. It is older than language, older than myth, yet it speaks a truth that endures, that mathematics is not invention, but discovery, that to measure the heavens is to glimpse the divine. From the cold Atlantic winds of Brittany, the trail of this ancient geometry now leads east, toward the jungles of Cambodia, where thousands of years later, another civilization would attempt to recreate the cosmos itself in stone. There, geometry becomes not only knowledge, but faith. The sacred design of the universe, raised as a temple on earth. In the steaming jungles of Cambodia, where banyan roots swallow ancient stone, rises a monument that defies both ruin and reason. It is vast, symmetrical, and cosmic in scale. A city built as an equation, a temple designed not merely for worship, but for time itself. This is Angkor Wat, the pinnacle of Khmer genius, and one of the most extraordinary mathematical structures ever conceived by human hands. Built in the early 12th century under King Sacsayhuaman II, Angkor Wat was dedicated to Vishnu, the preserver of worlds, yet its perfection transcends religion. The more one measures it, the more it seems to map not only heaven, but the machinery of the universe. Its corridors, towers, and courtyards form ratios that echo the motions of planets, the length of years, and the great cycles of precession that span tens of millennia. Every stone in Angkor Wat is part of a vast equation, a temple that counts time. The temple complex covers more than 400 acres, enclosed by a moat nearly 4 kilometers long. At its center rises a quincunx of towers, the highest piercing the sky at 65 meters. Each level ascends in perfect proportion, as if climbing from the mortal world toward the celestial. When measured, those proportions reveal mathematical relationships astonishingly precise. The distance from the outer wall to the central shrine mirrors the number of days in a solar year. The measurements of its galleries and terraces correspond to lunar months, the precessional cycle, even the supposed ages of the universe as described in ancient Indian cosmology. The numbers repeat with an elegance that suggests intention, not coincidence. In the Hindu system, the ages of the world, the yugas, unfold in cycles of 4,320,000 years. Divide that vast number by 1,000, and you find the same pattern embedded in the dimensions of Angkor Wat. The architects were expressing eternity through proportion, binding myth and mathematics into a single design. To build such a structure would be staggering today. In the 12th century, it was inconceivable. 5 to 10 million sandstone blocks, quarried from the distant Kulin Mountains and floated downriver, each one carved and placed without mortar. The precision of the joins, the symmetry of the towers, the perfect leveling of the foundations, all achieved on swampy ground that should have swallowed it whole. Modern engineers have discovered layers of sand and gravel beneath the foundations, an early form of soil stabilization. The builders of Angkor understood the weight of stone and the behavior of earth. They built for eternity. But Angkor Wat is not merely engineering. It is astronomy in stone. Its orientation is reversed compared to most temples. Its entrance faces west, toward the setting sun. Some scholars interpret this as a symbolic alignment with Vishnu, the god associated with the west. Others believe it was chosen to mark an astronomical phenomenon, the equinox sunset, when the sun aligns precisely with the temple's central axis and passes over the towers in a straight line. At that moment, for a few seconds each year, the temple becomes a sundial of cosmic precision, capturing the sun's descent with mathematical perfection. The bas-reliefs on the temple walls contain more than art. They are calendars. There are 1,796 carved apsaras, celestial dancers, and their number appears to correspond to lunar cycles spanning decades. The central causeway, when measured, encodes ratios tied to the Earth's circumference. Even the moat may serve a purpose beyond aesthetics. Its perimeter mirrors the dimensions of the equator when scaled according to the ratio of the temple's main tower to its base. Each discovery tightens the web, proof that this is not merely a temple, but a model of the universe itself. The builders worked according to Vastu Shastra, the ancient Indian science of architecture, a system that links geometry with cosmic harmony. According to these principles, the universe is ordered by a cosmic grid called the mandala. Angkor Wat is a three-dimensional mandala, a projection of the heavens onto Earth. Every tower represents a mountain of the gods, every courtyard a plane of existence. The central sanctuary symbolizes Mount Meru, the axis of creation, around which the sun, moon, and stars revolve. To walk through Angkor Wat is to move through the cosmos itself, from the outer oceans of chaos to the still center of divine order. Yet the deeper one looks, the stranger it becomes. When archaeologists mapped the surrounding jungle with airborne lasers, they discovered that Angkor was not a single temple, but the center of a vast urban grid. Canals, reservoirs, roads, and subsidiary temples all aligned with mathematical precision. The entire city was designed according to a grand geometric plan spanning over 1,000 square kilometers. This was not coincidence. It was the physical manifestation of a cosmic diagram, the heavens translated into infrastructure. And then there is the question of knowledge. How did 12th century builders working with wooden scaffolds and simple sighting instruments calculate such astronomical constants? Within the bas-reliefs lie numbers representing the solar year, the lunar month, and even the precessional cycle of 25,920 years, values that require long-term celestial observation. This knowledge, some argue, may have come from older Indian texts like the Surya Siddhanta, an astronomical treatise containing formulas astonishingly close to modern calculations. If the Khmer architects possessed this knowledge, they did not merely reproduce it, they elevated it. They transformed abstract mathematics into living architecture. Angkor Wat's perfection was not accidental. Every measurement, every carving, every reflection in the water was meant to reveal the unity of creation. Even sound plays a role. Some inner galleries produce echoes that resonate at precise intervals, as if designed for chants to sustain harmonic frequencies. To the ancients, vibration was not merely sound. It was the fabric of reality itself. The builders of Angkor may have been tuning their temple to the frequencies of the cosmos, but all cycles, even those of empires, end. In the 15th century, Angkor fell silent. The jungle reclaimed it. The canals dried, the reservoirs filled with silt, and the great city vanished into myth. Yet the temple remained, perfectly balanced, enduring as though built to outlast even time's erosion. Today, satellites orbit overhead, and when they map the temple's alignments, they find something humbling. Despite the shifting of Earth's axis, despite the centuries of decay, Angkor Wat's astronomical precision remains intact. Its geometry still mirrors the heavens. Its proportions still describe the mathematics of time. It has survived conquest, climate, and neglect, yet its ratios endure with the same clarity as when they were first measured in sacred cubits of the Khmer world. Angkor Wat is the moment when mathematics became divinity, when architecture ceased to imitate the gods and began to embody them. It is both calendar and cosmos, an expression of the eternal cycles that govern existence. And though its meaning has been obscured by centuries of silence, its message is unmistakable. The universe is built on pattern, and those who understand the pattern can glimpse eternity. From here, the trail of ancient geometry crosses oceans and hemispheres. The next chapter takes us high into the Andes, where another civilization shaped stone with an accuracy that rivals the precision of Angkor, but without writing, without wheels, and without metal. There, amid the thin air and blazing sun, the stones fit so tightly that even a blade of grass cannot pass between them. Sacsayhuaman, the fortress of impossible stone. High in the thin air of the Andes, above the ancient city of Cusco, lies a wall that defies logic. Its stones weigh more than locomotives, yet fit together with such precision that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. The Spanish conquistadors called it the work of giants. The Inca called it Sacsayhuaman, a fortress, a sanctuary, a monument to the gods. But to those who measure its geometry, it is something else entirely. A masterclass in engineering so advanced, it might as well have been carved by mathematics itself. The great zigzag walls of Sacsayhuaman stretch across the hillside like the spine of some ancient beast. Each block is unique, polygonal, irregular, and yet interlocked with a perfection that mocks the crude stonework of later centuries. Some weigh over 300 tons, quarried from miles away, cut with flawless precision, and placed so carefully that 500 years of earthquakes have not shifted them. The walls have survived the destruction of empires, the burning of Cusco, and the slow decay of time, all without mortar, without metal clamps, without error. The Inca claimed to have built it under the reign of Pachacuti in the 15th century, but the stone tells a more complicated story. At its base are blocks so massive and weathered that they seem far older than the rest, relics of an earlier age, perhaps inherited from a forgotten civilization. The Spanish, stunned by its scale, believed it to be the work of demons. Yet when engineers study it today, they find no demonic magic, only a mystery of geometry, physics, and human genius that remains unsolved. The precision of Sacsayhuaman lies not in straight lines, but in curves. Every joint follows a subtle convexity, an invisible bulge designed to lock the stones together. Each block's face angles inward slightly, distributing weight in perfect balance. The stones were shaped to interlock in 3 dimensions, absorbing seismic vibrations rather than resisting them. Modern architects recognize the same principle in earthquake-resistant designs today. The builders of Sacsayhuaman knew that to defy the earth, one must move with it. The quarry lies several kilometers away across the Tika Tika Plateau. To transport stones of such weight, some exceeding 100 tons, would have required an understanding of leverage, ramps, and friction far beyond what conventional history credits to the Inca. They had no wheels, no draft animals, and no iron tools. Yet they carved and moved these stones with a precision that rivals modern machining. When examined under magnification, the surfaces of the blocks show no chisel marks, only smooth, undulating planes, as if molded rather than carved. The corners are sharp, the angles deliberate, the fits so perfect they create airtight seals. In some places, the stones even curve around each other like fluid frozen in motion. The technique is still a mystery. Some propose the use of pounding stones and abrasives. Others, more controversially, suggest a lost method of softening stone, an organic process forgotten to time. Whatever the truth, the result is a structure that has survived every test of the Earth's fury. Cusco lies on a fault line, and over the centuries, countless earthquakes have reduced colonial and modern buildings to rubble. But Sacsayhuaman stands unbroken, the massive stones locked in place as if fused. When the ground trembles, the walls ripple but do not fall. Their geometry absorbs motion and transfers stress through a web of perfectly fitted angles. 5 centuries of observation have confirmed what the ancients already knew. Their wall was alive. It moved as the earth moved. But what was Sacsayhuaman's purpose? To call it a fortress is convenient but incomplete. The scale exceeds any practical need for defense. The upper terraces form 3 great zigzag lines, 3 walls stacked in terraces that mirror the movement of lightning. The name Sacsayhuaman itself translates roughly to satisfied falcon or head of the falcon, suggesting a symbolic design. From above, the entire structure resembles the head of a bird, with Cusco as its body, a city shaped according to celestial principles aligned with the constellations of the Inca sky. The Inca saw the heavens reflected in the land. Rivers were celestial pathways, mountains the resting places of gods. Sacsayhuaman, perched above the capital, was both fortress and observatory, both citadel and calendar. Its walls, with their angles and orientations, align with the solstices and equinoxes. On certain days, the sun casts shadows that trace patterns across the stones, patterns that correspond to solar and stellar cycles. These alignments suggest that Sacsayhuaman was not built only to guard the city, but to synchronize it with the cosmos. The mathematics of the site are everywhere. The terraces follow ratios of 3, 5, and 8, the same sequence found in the Fibonacci progression, echoed later in nature and architecture across the world. The dimensions of certain sections correspond to solar and lunar intervals. Even the zigzag layout, when plotted, traces an angular pattern reflecting the motion of lightning or the coiling of a serpent, symbols of energy and transformation in Andean cosmology. Such patterns were not arbitrary decoration, they were code. The Inca understood that numbers were sacred, that geometry was divine language. Their architects, like their astronomers, were priests of proportion. They saw no separation between mathematics and spirit. To build in harmony with the universe was itself an act of worship. And yet, the true origin of Sacsayhuaman's oldest stones remains uncertain. Beneath the Inca masonry lies evidence of even earlier construction, blocks eroded beyond recognition, their scale exceeding even the Incas' grandest efforts. Could they belong to a civilization lost before the rise of Cusco, one that mastered the same art of interlocking stone? The Andes are filled with such mysteries. Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, Pumapunku, each bears the same signature, precision without precedent, craftsmanship beyond explanation. When the Spanish arrived, they tore many of the smaller stones from Sacsayhuaman to build their churches below. They melted sacred geometry into conquest. Yet the great blocks resisted, too heavy, too perfect, too eternal. They remain as they were, silent witnesses to a mastery that refuses to be erased. Today, when engineers and archaeologists study the site, they often leave with more questions than answers. How were the angles planned? How were the blocks moved and raised? How was the geometry verified across such irregular shapes? The Inca left no blueprints. Their mathematics were lived, not written. Their precision was inherited, not calculated. To stand before Sacsayhuaman is to confront the impossible, not because the methods were magical, but because they reveal what human beings are capable of when their science is inseparable from their spirit. These walls were not built for utility alone. They were an act of faith, faith that form and order could capture the power of the cosmos itself. 5 centuries after its fall, Sacsayhuaman endures as proof that true knowledge is not measured in formulas or machines, but in permanence. Its geometry remains flawless, its stones unbroken, its message unchanged, that the earth itself is sacred, and that to master it, one must first understand its design. From these heights in the Andes, we now descend deeper into the mystery, to an even older landscape, a desert that once bloomed with water and starlight. There, before Egypt, before Mesopotamia, a forgotten people marked the dawn of astronomy in the sands of Africa. Nabta Playa, the desert observatory that predates them all. Before the first pharaoh raised his crown, before the sands of Egypt buried the memories of their own beginnings, a circle of stones stood in a distant desert, tracking the stars. Long before the Great Pyramid, long before writing, there was Nabta Playa, an ancient lakebed in southern Egypt, where a forgotten people built what may be the oldest astronomical observatory on Earth. 10,000 years ago, this was not desert. It was a savanna, a land of grasses, rain, and shallow lakes fed by monsoon rains. Nomadic herders came here each year to water their cattle. Yet among these transient lives, something permanent emerged. They arranged stones in circles and alignments, creating patterns that mirrored the heavens. The oldest of them, carbon dated to around 7,000 BCE, aligns with the rising of Orion's belt and the summer solstice sun. It predates Stonehenge by 2 millennia. It predates Egypt itself. Archaeologists first uncovered Nabta Playa in the late 20th century, a scattering of megaliths weathered almost to anonymity. But when mapped, the pattern was unmistakable. A central stone circle surrounded by smaller standing stones and alignments stretching outward like spokes of a wheel. When astronomers plotted those alignments, they found celestial precision. Certain pairs point directly to the sunrise and sunset of the summer solstice. Others mark the rising of specific stars, most notably Orion's belt and Sirius, the same two celestial beacons that would later define Egypt's religious calendar. This is where the enigma deepens. How could a pastoral culture, with no cities and no writing, construct an observatory with such astronomical accuracy? To align stones to solstitial and stellar points requires not only observation, but long-term measurement. Years, even generations of watching the horizon. It demands geometry, patience, and a concept of time larger than a human life. Yet these were herders, not mathematicians. At least, that is what we've always assumed. The layout of Nabta Playa reveals deliberate order. The central stone circle, roughly 4 meters in diameter, is surrounded by a complex of tumuli and megaliths extending over a kilometer. When viewed as a whole, the arrangement maps the movement of the sun and key stars across the sky. The tallest stones, positioned at specific azimuths, mark the path of the solstice sunrise and sunset. Others appear to frame the rising of Orion's belt around 4,800 BCE, the same constellation later associated with Osiris, the Egyptian god of rebirth. It is as though the blueprint of Egyptian cosmology was drawn here first, in silence, long before the Nile civilization was born. Some researchers believe Nabta Playa represents humanity's first attempt to integrate astronomy into ritual, the merging of observation and meaning. The circle may have served as both calendar and temple, tracking the rains and seasons while anchoring the cycles of heaven to the life of the earth. To the herders, the sun determined survival. To align stones with its path was to align with the rhythm of existence itself. But Nabta Playa is not just a calendar. It may also encode deeper knowledge, geometry hidden within geometry. When the site's coordinates are projected and measured, certain ratios emerge, distances and angles that correspond to harmonic relationships found later in Egyptian architecture. The spacing between keystones matches ratios of 3 to 4 to 5, the Pythagorean triangle, 2,000 years before Pythagoras was born. Whether by intuition or design, the builders had discovered the mathematics of harmony. The central circle contains 6 upright stones framing 2 pairs of smaller slabs. These pairs, when connected, align precisely with the summer solstice sunrise and the north-south meridian. To achieve such accuracy requires a fixed reference, something that can only be established through prolonged celestial observation. The builders of Nabta Playa, in other words, were the first known astronomers. When the rains failed and the savanna turned to desert, the people of Nabta moved north, toward the Nile Valley. There they carried their cosmology with them. Over centuries, their sky-watching traditions evolved into the solar religion of Heliopolis and the star-aligned architecture of the Old Kingdom. The pyramid fields of Giza, the temples of Dendera, the celestial corridors of Abydos, all may trace their lineage back to this forgotten circle in the sand. The parallels are impossible to ignore. At both Nabta Playa and Giza, Orion and Sirius dominate the sky. Both cultures aligned monuments to the solstices. Both saw the sun as the bringer of life, death, and rebirth. The astronomical constants that appear at Nabta, the same declinations, the same ratios, reappear thousands of years later in the pyramids. The pattern suggests continuity, knowledge passed from herders to kings, from nomads to priests, from stone circle to pyramid. And yet there is another layer still. Some researchers have suggested that the alignments of Nabta Playa do not merely track the solstice of their own time, but predict the precessional shifts of the stars, that the builders somehow understood the slow wobble of the Earth's axis long before recorded history. If true, this would imply observations spanning many lifetimes, an unbroken chain of memory stretching across millennia. Such a possibility forces a reconsideration of what we mean by civilization. If Nabta Playa's builders could measure celestial motion, if they could encode geometry and time in stone, then the origins of science may not lie in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but here, in a forgotten culture beneath the African sky. When the lake finally vanished around 4900 BCE, the site was abandoned. The wind buried it. The sand erased all trace of its builders. Only the stones remained, waiting for the desert to retreat and reveal them again. And when they were found, it was as if the earth had uncovered its own memory. A record of the moment when humanity first looked up and realized that the heavens could be measured. Nabta Playa reminds us that civilization does not begin with cities or kings, but with awareness. The awareness that the universe moves according to laws, that the sun rises not by whim, but by design. These stones are the earliest testimony to that realization. They are the first geometry of wonder, the first attempt to give shape to time itself. From the deserts of Africa, this lineage of thought traveled north and east, finding new expression in every age. The builders of Nabta Playa may have vanished, but their legacy endured, reborn in the temples of Egypt, in the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, in the megaliths of Europe. The pattern is clear. Wherever humans looked up and saw order in the sky, they sought to carve that order into the earth. Nabta Playa was the beginning, the first breath of science, the dawn of sacred geometry. Long before we named numbers, before we mapped the stars, before we called ourselves civilized, there were people who understood the sky as code. They built not for power, but for remembrance, a monument to a truth that even now, in our age of machines, remains unchanged. The stars move, the earth turns, and somewhere in the silence of the Sahara, the first astronomers marked the rhythm of eternity in stone. In the high desert of New Mexico, where the sun burns the mesas to gold and the nights fall into a silence older than time, lies a city that should not exist, a city of stone, geometry, and light, built by a people who left no written words and yet measured the heavens with a precision that rivals the ancients of Egypt. This is Chaco Canyon, the sacred heart of the ancestral Puebloan world, and one of the most extraordinary alignments of architecture and astronomy ever discovered on the American continent. From the air, the ruins of Chaco form patterns so deliberate they could only have been drawn by mathematics. Straight roads extend for miles through the desert, radiating from the canyon like spokes from a wheel, some dead straight for 50 kilometers, crossing canyons, hills, and cliffs without deviation. Massive great houses, multi-storied, carefully oriented, stand along these lines like observatories in a forgotten network. The largest, Pueblo Bonito, contained more than 600 rooms, built in arcs and circles that mirror celestial motions. Its walls align precisely to the cardinal directions. Its windows frame the sun and moon. Archaeologists once saw Chaco as a trading center, a ceremonial hub, or even a fortress. But when modern researchers mapped its architecture against the sky, a deeper purpose emerged. The entire complex, it seems, was built as a cosmic clock, a landscape-scale observatory linking Earth, sky, and human ritual into a single design. At the heart of this revelation is one phenomenon, the sun dagger. On the summit of Fajada Butte, overlooking the canyon, 3 great slabs of sandstone lean against the cliff face. Behind them, a spiral of stone, carved centuries ago, waits in the shadows. And twice, each year, at the summer and winter solstices, a single blade of sunlight passes through the narrow gaps between the slabs and strikes the spiral at its center. At the equinox, 2 blades flank it perfectly. This pattern is so precise that it marks not only the turning of the seasons, but also the 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle, one of the rarest and longest astronomical rhythms visible to the human eye. To understand and encode such cycles demands generations of observation. The builders of Chaco knew the sky in motion, not as myth, but as mechanism. They tracked the oscillations of the moon, the shifting of shadows, the geometry of light. Their architecture became a calendar you could walk inside. Each great house in the canyon carries this cosmic fingerprint. Casa Rinconada, the largest kiva, a circular ceremonial chamber, is aligned so that on the morning of the summer solstice, sunlight streams through a small window to illuminate a niche on the opposite wall. The alignment is not approximate. It is exact. Other buildings face lunar rise and set points, marking the extremes of the moon's path. Even the distances between sites encode astronomical relationships, ratios of the solar year, lunar month, and cardinal directions repeated across the landscape. Yet the people of Chaco had no metal tools, no written language, no beasts of burden. They built using sandstone, timber, and mathematics. Logs from distant mountains were carried over 70 kilometers to roof their structures. The precision of their masonry rivals that of cathedrals. Stones are set in coursed patterns, bonded with mud mortar, their faces shaped to fit together like pages of a book. In every detail, from the placement of doorways to the ratio of rooms, there is intention. The builders of Chaco were not primitive tribes. They were scientists, artists, and philosophers whose laboratory was the sky. At night, the canyon must have glowed with the light of sacred fires and the slow procession of stars. The Milky Way, arching overhead, mirrored the line of the Great North Road, a straight path stretching toward the horizon, believed to connect the world of the living to the realm of the spirits. Every solstice, every lunar standstill, every equinox, rituals were performed to synchronize the people with the cosmos. Their architecture did not merely symbolize the heavens, it participated in them. And then, around the year 1150, the lights went out. The great houses were sealed. The roads fell silent. Chaco Canyon was abandoned. What happened remains uncertain. Drought, famine, social collapse, perhaps all of them at once. But some researchers believe there was also a cosmic reason. The great lunar standstill cycle, the one Chaco had tracked so perfectly, reached its climax around that time. The moon's path across the sky expanded to its maximum, an event that occurs only every 18.6 years. If the canyon was built to harmonize with celestial order, perhaps its end came when the order itself shifted, when the heavens no longer aligned with the stones. Yet even in ruin, Chaco's design endures. When modern astronomers overlay the canyon's coordinates with celestial charts, the accuracy remains astonishing. The great houses align to within a fraction of a degree of their intended targets. Their builders not only knew true north, they defined it centuries before the magnetic compass. They built with cardinal precision, tracking declinations that require both geometric insight and deep time. This fusion of science and spirituality reveals a worldview in which knowledge was not separate from faith. The people of Chaco did not observe the sky to conquer it, but to belong to it. They saw themselves as participants in a cosmic rhythm, each cycle of the moon, each turn of the sun, a pulse in the living heartbeat of the universe. Their legacy survives not in books, but in stone. The sun dagger still falls across the spiral each solstice, though the slabs have shifted with erosion. The great houses still stand, silent but ordered, their shadows moving like clock hands over the desert floor. When the solstice dawn rises over the canyon, light still enters the ancient windows in perfect alignment, just as it did 1,000 years ago. Chaco Canyon is a testament to the human desire to measure the unmeasurable, to turn time itself into architecture. Here, on this lonely plateau, a civilization without metal or writing mapped the same heavens that guided the pyramids and the temples of Angkor. Their geometry, though separated by oceans and millennia, speaks the same language, the mathematics of light. To understand Chaco is to understand a universal impulse, the need to anchor the infinite in the finite, to give form to the formless. From the desert herders of Nabta Playa to the builders of Chaco, the same truth echoes. Civilization is born not from conquest, but from curiosity. As the sun sets over the canyon's broken walls, the silence feels deliberate, a pause in a song that never ended. For even in abandonment, Chaco remains a clock still ticking. 1,000 years later, the cycles it measured continue in the sky above, indifferent to our memory yet faithful to their rhythm. And so, as the desert night deepens, the ancient city waits, not for rediscovery, but for comprehension. The architects of the sun and moon are gone, but their mathematics remains. The stones still speak. We have only begun to listen. From the deserts of the southwest, our journey now turns across the sea, to the waters off Greece, where a corroded bronze machine, recovered from a shipwreck, reveals that the ancients once built time itself into a mechanism, the Antikythera mechanism, the clockwork of the ancient world. In the blue silence of the Aegean Sea, a Roman ship sank more than 2,000 years ago. Its cargo was treasure, bronze statues, amphorae, marble torsos, the plunder of a fallen world bound for Italy. But hidden among those relics was something far greater. A corroded lump of metal, green with centuries of salt and decay. It seemed unremarkable at first, until the scientists who examined it realized it was not sculpture but machinery. Inside that rusted fragment lay gears, dials, inscriptions, the remnants of a device so sophisticated that it would rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. They called it the Antikythera mechanism. Recovered in 1901 by sponge divers near the Greek island of Antikythera, it remained a mystery for decades. But when X-ray imaging and computed tomography revealed its interior, the revelation was staggering. More than 30 bronze gears meshed in perfect harmony, teeth so finely cut that even modern craftsmen struggle to replicate them. The mechanism was no larger than a shoebox, yet it modeled the cosmos itself. It tracked the sun, the moon, and the planets. It predicted eclipses. It displayed the phases of the moon with breathtaking accuracy. It was a clockwork universe, built in the 2nd century before Christ. Each gear corresponded to a celestial motion. Turn a crank, and the heavens moved. The front dial showed the solar year and the zodiac. The back, a pair of spirals marking the Metonic and Saros cycles, the rhythms of the moon's orbit and its eclipses. Inscriptions etched into its casing described the rising and setting of stars, the timing of lunar phases, even the colors of upcoming eclipses. It was a computer made of bronze, a machine that calculated the patterns of the sky long before the age of machines. To build such a device requires knowledge that should not have existed in its time. The mathematics of gear ratios, the metallurgy of fine casting, the astronomical data to synchronize multiple cycles, all of it suggests a civilization of engineers and scientists capable of precision unseen for another 1,000 years. The Antikythera mechanism, predates the first European mechanical clocks by more than a millennium. Its next true descendant would not appear until the Renaissance. So how did it come to be? The people of Tiwanaku saw geometry as sacred. To them, the cosmos was not chaos, but order, a structure of repeating patterns reflected in mountains, stars, and stone. Pumapunku may have been their attempt to build that order into the physical world, to recreate the precision of the heavens on earth. But the city fell. Around the year 1000 CE, the Tiwanaku civilization collapsed, likely due to climate change, famine, and social upheaval. The canals dried, the people scattered, and Pumapunku was left to the wind. Earthquakes shattered its perfect alignments. The Spanish looted its stones. What remains now is only a fragment, a jigsaw of megaliths scattered across the plateau. Yet even in ruin, the geometry endures. When measured today, the stones still reveal mathematical relationships, proportions of 1 to the square root of 2, 3 to 4 to 5, and other harmonic ratios found in nature and music. The same patterns appear in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, in the golden spirals of Greek temples, in the spacing of the Carnac alignments. Across continents, across millennia, humanity seems to return again and again to the same geometric truths, as though guided by a universal grammar written into the fabric of reality itself. It is this universality that makes Pumapunku so haunting. It should be an isolated curiosity, a single anomaly on a remote plateau. Instead, it fits perfectly into a global pattern of lost geometry. It shares with Giza the obsession with alignment, with Angkor the reverence for proportion, with Stonehenge the dialogue between stone and sky. It suggests that knowledge, once discovered, can echo across the ages, surviving not in text but in form. Perhaps this is why the ancients chose stone. Wood rots, bronze corrodes, words are forgotten. But geometry endures. To stand among the ruins of Pumapunku is to feel the weight of that endurance. Each block hums with precision, even in silence. Each line feels deliberate, purposeful. The stones are not random wreckage. They are the vocabulary of an ancient equation, fragments of a sentence we can no longer read. We call it a mystery, but perhaps it is a mirror, reflecting our own hunger to understand, to measure, to transcend. The builders of Pumapunku may not have had our machines, but they shared our mathematics. They saw the same patterns in the stars, the same order in chaos, and in carving those patterns into the hardest stone they could find, they ensured that their knowledge would outlast them. The code remains. Across continents, it whispers the same truth, that civilization is not merely the rise of cities, but the rediscovery of geometry, the eternal structure of reality made visible. And as we trace that pattern forward, it becomes clear that these mysteries were never separate. From Gobekli Tepe to Pumapunku, each site is a chapter in a single story, the human quest to measure the divine. But how could these patterns emerge independently across oceans and ages? How could cultures divided by millennia converge upon the same mathematical language? The answer may lie not in the stones themselves, but in the mind that shaped them. Next, we will follow that thread to the hidden mathematics that connects all ancient monuments, revealing a geometry so consistent, so precise, that it transcends culture and time. The geometry of myth, shared ratios across continents. Across the world, separated by oceans, time and language, the same shapes emerge, circles and spirals, pyramids and triangles, ratios that repeat like a heartbeat, as if drawn not by culture, but by nature itself. From Egypt to Mesoamerica, from Stonehenge to Angkor, from the Andes to Easter Island, the same geometry appears again and again, whispering of a forgotten unity. How could such mathematical precision arise independently? Or did it never truly vanish, only scatter, waiting to be rediscovered by minds attuned to the same eternal order? This is the geometry of myth, the hidden symmetry that links civilizations long thought isolated, revealing that beneath their gods and rituals lay the same foundation: number, proportion, and pattern. The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes pi and phi, the golden ratio, within its slope and base. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the same ratio governs the layout of the Avenue of the Dead and the placement of the Pyramid of the Sun. At Angkor Wat, the distances between its towers reflect the precession of the equinoxes, 25,920 years, the same cosmic cycle known to the Maya and the Sumerians. In Britain, the megaliths of Stonehenge and Avebury form geometric relationships that mirror lunar cycles. And in the Andes, at Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, the spacing of blocks follows harmonic proportions seen in the temples of the Old World. Thousands of years, thousands of miles, and yet the same mathematics. Some dismiss this as coincidence, the natural outcome of geometry itself. Circles and triangles, after all, are universal forms. But the precision defies chance. These ancient builders were not simply stacking stones, they were encoding constants. Across continents they found the same numbers sacred: 3, 4, 5, the triangle that defines right angles, 432, the number that echoes in myth, music, and time. In India, the yugas unfold over 4,320,000 years. In Babylon, the gods ruled in cycles of 432,000. In Norse myth, Valhalla's warriors numbered 432,000. In the human body, the average heartbeat multiplied over a day approximates 432,000. And in physics, the frequency 432 Hz produces harmonics that mirror natural resonance. It is as if the ancients across time and distance discovered the same hidden rhythm woven into the universe and built it into stone. The golden ratio, phi, 1.618, appears in the spiral of galaxies, the growth of shells, the proportions of the human body. The ancients did not need to calculate it. They saw it in nature. They carved it into temples, pyramids, and statues because they recognized it as divine. To them, beauty was not arbitrary. It was mathematics rendered visible. The same is true of pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Found in Egypt's pyramids, in Mesoamerican architecture, even in the layout of ancient Chinese cities, pi is the bridge between straight and curved, between the finite and the infinite. What these civilizations shared was not contact, but consciousness, an awareness that the world operates on pattern. Whether through direct transmission or parallel revelation, they reached the same conclusion: that geometry is the language of the cosmos. Consider the mandalas of Tibet and India, sacred diagrams mapping spiritual ascent through nested squares and circles. Now compare them to the Celtic spirals of Newgrange, the labyrinths of Crete, or the petroglyphs of the American Southwest. All embody the same form, the spiral, the journey inward toward unity. The same motif appears in Polynesian tattoos, in Aboriginal songlines, in the Nazca lines of Peru. The geometry of myth transcends culture because it arises from the same human attempt to describe infinity. But geometry is not only visual, it is sonic, temporal, rhythmic. The builders of ancient temples understood resonance, the vibration of sound within form. In Egypt's Great Chamber, in the Hypogeum of Malta, in Chaco Canyon's kivas, the architecture amplifies frequencies corresponding to human speech and heartbeat. The ratios of their chambers create standing waves. When priests or shamans chanted within them, the sound would not simply echo, it would vibrate through the body. Architecture became instrument, mathematics became experience. Such design reveals a worldview in which science and spirituality were not divided. To measure the cosmos was to commune with it. Every temple, every pyramid, every circle was a physical expression of harmony. The same harmony seen in planetary motion, in tides, in the dance of electrons. The ancients did not study the universe as we do now. They lived inside its equation. Even myth itself encodes this geometry. The flood stories of Mesopotamia, the Mayan creation cycles, the Hindu destruction and rebirth of worlds, all follow astronomical timeframes. The ages of man, the great years of the gods. These are precessional numbers, describing the slow wobble of Earth's axis. When a civilization spoke of golden and dark ages, of epochs rising and falling, they were not only telling stories, they were describing the mathematics of the sky. Modern scholars call this astrotheology, the fusion of celestial observation and religious narrative. But to the ancients, there was no fusion, only unity. The gods were the planets, the heavens the divine machine, and time itself a circle that endlessly renews. The geometry of myth was their proof, that what is above is as below, that the universe and the human are reflections of one another. When we rediscover these ratios in ruins across the globe, we are not uncovering conspiracy or coincidence. We are glimpsing a forgotten intelligence, a shared intuition that consciousness and cosmos are bound by number. Whether by diffusion or by parallel invention, humanity's greatest civilizations found the same truth, that mathematics is not invention, but revelation. And yet, for all its universality, this knowledge was fragile. With every collapse, with each drought, invasion, or plague, the continuity broke. The geometry survived, but its meaning was lost. The ratios endured, but the reason behind them faded into superstition. Now, standing among these stones, we can measure what they measured, calculate what they encoded, but we cannot feel what they felt. To them, a ratio was not a number, it was a prayer. Perhaps that is what we have forgotten. In our pursuit of understanding, we separate mind from matter, faith from formula. But in the ancient world, they were one. Geometry was not only the measure of reality, it was the language of the divine. When the builders of Angkor Wat aligned their towers to the heavens, when the architects of Giza angled their pyramids to true north, when the Tiwanaku masons carved perfect right angles into volcanic stone, they were all saying the same thing, that the structure of the cosmos is the structure of consciousness itself. Across continents, the myth endures, a quiet assertion that everything, from the orbit of planets to the beating of the human heart, moves in harmony with an unseen order. And perhaps that is the real secret of these ancient monuments. They were not built to glorify kings, nor to appease gods, nor to measure time. They were built to remind those who came after that the universe is knowable, that beauty, truth, and mathematics are one. But even this universal language can be forgotten. And when it was, humanity fell into silence, an age of darkness between discoveries. The stones remained, but their meaning faded, waiting for us to listen again. Now we must ask the question the ancients already answered. How does such knowledge survive the fall of civilizations? How is it passed, generation after generation, when memory fails but pattern endures? To find that answer, we turn next to the hidden networks of transmission, to how knowledge, even when forbidden, continues to echo through time. The architects of time, knowledge and transmission. Civilizations rise, they build, they measure, they vanish. But knowledge, true knowledge, rarely disappears entirely. It travels, sometimes in stone, sometimes in song, sometimes in silence. The great architects of the past were not only builders of monuments but custodians of memory. Their work was not merely to construct temples and calendars, but to ensure that what they had discovered about the sky, about the earth, about the hidden harmonies between them, would endure long after their names were forgotten. These were the architects of time, the unseen lineage of minds who understood that knowledge, if it is to survive the collapse of empires, must be encoded in form itself. A library can burn, a tablet can shatter, but a ratio, a shadow, a sunrise, these cannot be destroyed. Consider the passage of geometry from one age to another. The builders of Nabta Playa vanished into the desert. Yet the same solstitial alignments reappeared centuries later along the Nile. The astronomer priests of Heliopolis measured the heavens using the same geometry that their Neolithic ancestors had already mapped in stone. The Egyptians codified this wisdom into temples and myth, embedding astronomical constants within ritual and architecture, passing observation through symbolism rather than text.
When Egypt fell, the torch passed again, to Greece, to Babylon, to India, to the Maya. Across continents, geometry was preserved not as science but as story. The myth of Osiris, dismembered and reassembled, mirrored the fragmentation and reconstitution of celestial cycles. The Hindu concept of Yuga, the great world ages, encoded the precession of the equinoxes. The Maya's long-count calendar measured the same cycles in days.
The form changed. The mathematics did not. Every great civilization inherited fragments of a forgotten whole, each believing itself to be the first to discover what had always been known. The architects of time did not merely preserve data, they preserved pattern recognition. They understood that while languages and empires perish, mathematics persists, that the ratio of a circle, the movement of a shadow, the tilt of Earth's axis would remain long after their civilizations crumbled to dust. And so they built monuments as memory machines, structures that could teach without words. The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes the length of the solar year in its perimeter, the curvature of the Earth in its base, and the ratio of pi in its slope. Angkor Wat preserves the Yuga cycles in its courtyards. Stonehenge measures the moon. Chaco Canyon tracks the standstill of the lunar orbit. These are not coincidences, they are chapters of the same story, written in the universal language of number. Knowledge, to the ancients, was sacred, too important to entrust to parchment or proclamation. Instead, they wove it into ritual, into architecture, into rhythm. A child born into the right season would witness the solstice light entering a temple and understand instinctively the relationship between sun and time. No priest needed to explain it. The temple itself was the teacher.
This is how knowledge survives oblivion.
When Greece inherited Egypt's wisdom, the philosophers reinterpreted it as metaphysics. Pythagoras taught that number was the essence of all things, that harmony and proportion governed the cosmos. Plato echoed the same idea, calling the world a living mathematical being, its soul written in geometry. These were not new ideas, they were reinterpretations of something much older. The belief that the structure of the universe could be known through measure, and that by understanding it, humanity could align itself with the divine. Even as science and spirituality diverged, this lineage persisted, quietly, invisibly. From Alexandria's library to the workshops of Baghdad, from Roman engineers to medieval cathedral builders, the ancient ratios never died. They resurfaced in the arches of Gothic cathedrals, in the domes of the Renaissance, in the equations of Kepler and Newton. The architects of time worked through centuries, anonymous and tireless, ensuring that the golden thread of geometry was never entirely severed. But not all transmission is direct. Some of it lies buried within myth itself, encoded as metaphor, awaiting rediscovery. The serpent that circles the world, Ouroboros, symbolizes the precessional cycle of 25,920 years. The great flood myths, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Bible, may preserve memories of rapid climate shifts at the end of the last ice age. The phoenix that burns and is reborn echoes the rise and fall of civilizations themselves. Every story, every legend, carries fragments of data disguised as divine narrative. The ancients knew that memory is fragile. They understood that power corrupts knowledge, and that truth must sometimes be hidden to endure. That is why sacred geometry was cloaked in religion, why cosmic cycles were taught as parable. The builders of old did not merely construct temples, they constructed encryption. Even today we are decoding their work. Astronomers have rediscovered alignments long dismissed as superstition. Mathematicians find irrational constants embedded in ancient designs. Archaeologists unearth forgotten metrologies that link continents. And with every discovery, we come closer to realizing that what we call progress may be the rediscovery of a cycle, that we are not the culmination of human thought, but another phase within its eternal rotation. To study the monuments of the ancients is to confront the possibility that intelligence has risen and fallen many times, that history is less a straight line than a spiral, endlessly circling the same truths. The architects of time understood this. They built not for their own generation, but for the ones that would come after the next collapse. They did not know who would read their code, only that someone eventually would. And now, here we are, decoding the geometry of the past with satellites and lasers, computers and algorithms, finally able to see what they built to be seen from above. The monuments are not simply structures, they are signals designed for eyes that could one day look down from the sky. Perhaps they knew this. Perhaps they built for us. To measure time is to measure loss, but also recurrence. Civilizations fall, and yet the constants remain. The number pi never changes. The solstice still divides the year. The same stars still cross the same horizon as they did when the first stones were raised. The knowledge was never lost, only waiting. We are the inheritors of their message. Whether we choose to listen determines whether the next cycle will remember us or forget us. For even now, as we build our towers of glass and circuits, we are still architects of time. Our satellites trace the same orbits, our clocks divide the same rotations, and like those before us, we may one day vanish, leaving behind only what we have built and what we have understood. The question is, what will endure of us? The ancients answered that question with stone, but not all their knowledge could be preserved. Much was erased by cataclysm, by conquest, by neglect. The next age inherited only fragments, the faint geometry of a forgotten symphony. And so we turn to what came after the light faded, when the monuments fell silent and the knowledge that once shaped the world was swallowed by darkness. The silence of the stones, what we've lost. There comes a moment in every civilization when the stones go silent, when the languages that once named them fade into dust, when the rituals that aligned them to the heavens are forgotten and their meaning becomes myth. What remains are the monuments, mute, immovable, and enduring, while everything else, even memory, dissolves. We live in that silence now. The great builders of the past measured the universe in stone, encoding within it their mathematics, their cosmology, their faith. But their equations have eroded, their stories have fractured, and their geometry, once a language of communion with the cosmos, has become a riddle. What they saw as divine order, we see as anomaly. What they experienced as revelation, we reduce to data. This is the silence of the stones, the gap between knowing and understanding. When the Library of Alexandria burned, it was more than parchment that turned to ash. It was continuity, the bridge between ages. Thousands of years of accumulated insight, gone in an instant. The knowledge of celestial mechanics, the records of civilizations before Egypt, the maps of forgotten worlds, all erased. And yet the irony is this: the stones survived. The pyramids still stood, the temples still aligned, the geometry still whispered. But no one remained who could interpret the song. We measure now what they once felt. We chart what they once worshipped. We categorize what they once called divine. The ancients saw mathematics not as abstraction, but as revelation. Proof that the cosmos was alive and ordered. When they built, they were not constructing monuments to their gods. They were reconstructing the universe itself, in miniature. And when that knowledge died, something essential in humanity died with it. The fall of every great civilization, Sumer, Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Maya, follows the same pattern. Knowledge accumulates, power centralizes, complexity rises, then something fractures. Drought, war, hubris, neglect, and the pattern collapses. The libraries burn, the scribes die, the secrets scatter. The next age inherits only fragments, enough to wonder but never to understand. And so begins another cycle of rediscovery, another climb toward truths already known and forgotten. The silence between these ages is not absence, but amnesia. When we look upon the ruins, Angkor's towers swallowed by jungle, Tiwanaku buried in dust, Stonehenge weathered by rain, we are not seeing relics of superstition. We are seeing the residue of understanding. The last words of a conversation humanity once had with the universe, before we forgot how to listen. There is something almost unbearable about that loss. The precision of their alignments, the harmony of their proportions, the elegance of their astronomical models, all point to a consciousness that saw the world as an integrated whole. We have divided it into disciplines: physics, geometry, religion, art. They saw no such boundaries. For them, to build was to pray, to measure was to know, and to know was to remember who we are in the cosmic order. But history is merciless. Floods erased entire coastlines, earthquakes buried cities, empires devoured each other. Conquerors looted the stones and called their makers primitive. The survivors, stripped of their heritage, told only stories, stories that over time became myth and then fantasy. The gods became metaphors, the science became magic, the silence deepened. Yet through that silence faint echoes remain, ratios that repeat in our architecture, constellations named by forgotten tongues, the persistence of sacred numbers 3, 4, 7, 12 in our calendars, our symphonies, our rituals. Even now, our modern cities unconsciously echo the geometry of the ancients. We align streets to cardinal directions. We mark time by solstices and equinoxes. We speak of harmony, balance, proportion, words inherited from those who built to mirror the heavens. Perhaps we never truly lost it. Perhaps we only stopped recognizing it. The ancients understood that destruction is part of the cycle, that every civilization, no matter how advanced, will one day fall into silence, and that silence too has purpose. The stones were never meant to speak forever. They were built to endure long enough for us to remember how to listen again. And we are listening again. In recent decades, with satellites and sensors, lasers and algorithms, we have begun to uncover what time tried to erase. We can now map the orientation of pyramids, measure the alignments of megaliths, reconstruct the calendars of vanished worlds. The mathematics hidden in these monuments are no longer invisible. The pattern is returning. The stones are speaking once more, not in myth, but in data. And as we decode their geometry, we glimpse a humbling truth. We were never the first to know these things. We are merely the latest to rediscover them. The ancients were not primitive, they were precise. They understood something we have only begun to relearn, that science without reverence is incomplete, and reverence without science is blind. The silence of the stones is not a void, it is an invitation. Each ruin is a question left behind for us to answer. Each alignment a reminder that we are part of something larger, cyclical, eternal. The ancients carved their knowledge into the most permanent medium they could find, knowing that someday, perhaps now, someone would look again and understand. And yet, for all we have uncovered, we still stand at the threshold of mystery. We can measure but not remember. We can replicate but not comprehend. The deeper we probe into the mathematics of the past, the more we realize that the true loss was not the data, but the vision, the worldview that united mind and cosmos, measurement and meaning, matter and spirit. That unity is what we have lost, and perhaps what we are meant to find again. The silence will not last forever. Already the stones are stirring in our collective awareness, not as relics but as reminders. They are telling us, in the only language they know, that the universe is written in number and that we once knew how to read it. But to hear them fully, we must transcend archaeology and return to philosophy. We must look not just at the stones, but through them, to the idea they represent. For if every civilization before us has fallen, and yet the pattern persists, what does that say about the design itself? Is civilization an accident or an inevitability? Is intelligence a product of chance or a principle written into the fabric of time? And if so, will we too become just another echo in the geometry of eternity? In the final chapter of this story, we return to the beginning, to the question the ancients already answered, and we have forgotten how to ask. What is the eternal equation, the pattern that binds all things, that builds worlds, that endures beyond our forgetting? The eternal equation, humanity's forgotten memory. There is a pattern in everything, in the orbit of the planets, in the spiral of a galaxy, in the rhythm of a heartbeat, in the architecture of a temple. It is the same pattern that guided the hands of our ancestors, the same one that drew their gaze to the stars, the same whisper that compelled them to carve eternity into stone. The ancients knew it by instinct, that reality itself is built on mathematics, not the mathematics of human invention, but of cosmic truth. Ratios that repeat across scale, symmetry that binds the infinite to the infinitesimal. From the curve of a shell to the arc of the Milky Way, the same geometry endures, and somewhere deep within us, we remember it. This is the eternal equation, not a formula written on paper, but a memory etched into the universe itself. All across time, humans have rediscovered fragments of this equation, mistaking each revelation for invention. The Pythagoreans believed that number was the essence of the divine. The builders of Egypt, Sumer and Angkor, used geometry to mirror the heavens. The astronomers of Chaco and Nabta mapped celestial cycles that predate history itself. Every civilization believed it was deciphering the universe for the first time, never realizing that the knowledge already existed, buried beneath the sediment of forgetting. We are not the first to understand. We are the first to remember again. The constants never change. Pi, phi, the harmonic ratios, they are as old as creation. What changes is our capacity to see them. Every few thousand years, humanity rediscovers what it once knew, that consciousness and cosmos are two sides of the same design. The ancients encoded this revelation not in words but in architecture, so that it might survive our amnesia. They built machines of memory, pyramids, temples, circles, cities, aligned to the same celestial equations. Each one was a mirror reflecting the same truth, that we belong to the pattern, not apart from it. To understand this is to see civilization itself differently. Progress is not a line, but a circle, knowledge rising and falling like breath. Empires crumble, languages die, but the mathematics remains, waiting to be spoken again. We are participants in an ancient recurrence, each era another attempt to solve the same equation, to name the same invisible order. Perhaps this is the real story of humanity, not the story of invention, but of remembrance. The stones were never meant to survive for glory. They were left as reminders. They stand not for what their builders knew, but for what they understood. That the universe is an act of symmetry, and that every conscious being is a reflection of its geometry. When we gaze at their precision, we are looking not at their achievement, but at our own potential. Every monument in this story, from Gobekli Tepe to Pumapunku, is a proof of concept, an experiment in permanence. The builders understood that civilizations die, but proportion endures. That if you want to speak to eternity, you must speak in numbers. And they did. In the Great Pyramid, the ratio between height and perimeter equals the circle's constant pi, as though the builders sought to unite the square and the circle, earth and heaven. In Angkor Wat, the temple's layout measures the yuga cycles, vast epochs of creation and destruction. In Chaco Canyon, light marks the turning of the sun. In the Antikythera mechanism, gears reproduce the movement of planets. Each is a fragment of the same thought, that time and matter are governed by order, and that order can be known. It is no coincidence that the word cosmos means both universe and beauty. To the ancients, the two were inseparable. A world that is ordered is a world that is beautiful, and to live in harmony with that order is to become part of its design. But modernity has forgotten this. We have inherited the mathematics but lost the meaning. We calculate the orbit of galaxies, but not the purpose of their motion. We build machines that model the universe, but forget that the universe itself is the model, a vast geometry through which consciousness moves, learning to see itself.
The eternal equation was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be experienced.
It is written not only in stone or star, but in us. The same proportions that shape the spiral of a fern shape the coils of our DNA. The same ratios that govern the orbit of moons govern the firing of neurons. We are, in a literal sense, expressions of the same mathematics we seek to understand. The universe does not contain order. It is order, unfolding through awareness. And perhaps that is the final revelation. The ancients did not worship the sun or the stars as gods. They recognized them as mirrors. In their geometry, they saw themselves. That is why they built, not for power, not for empire, but for remembrance. Every temple was a bridge between the finite and the infinite, every alignment a reminder that we too are celestial bodies in motion. The ancients sought to synchronize their lives with the cosmos because they understood the danger of forgetting. That when a civilization loses its alignment with the pattern, it falls into chaos. That is the silence we now inhabit, the distance between knowledge and wisdom.
But the equation has never stopped speaking. It still hums beneath the surface of things, in the orbits of planets, in the frequencies of sound, in the beating of the human heart. We may drown it in noise, in haste, in the static of progress, but it is always there, waiting for rediscovery.
The ancients left their monuments as tuning forks for civilization, to remind us of resonance, proportion, and purpose, to realign us should we drift too far. And we have drifted. Yet even now, as we build our digital towers and virtual cathedrals, the same impulse drives us, to find order in chaos, meaning in complexity, harmony in motion. We are still the same species that raised the first stones to the sky, trying to speak the language of eternity. In the end, the stones are not what matter. They are only the punctuation marks of an unfinished sentence, a message written across millennia, still being read. The eternal equation is not out there, it is here, in the ratio of thought and breath, of birth and death, of atom and star. We are its proof. And perhaps that was always the message hidden in the silence, that the universe remembers itself through us, that the pattern is conscious, that creation is not a beginning, but an ongoing act of recognition. Every civilization is a moment in that recognition. Every monument a mirror of awareness. Every collapse a pause before the next remembering. And someday when we too are gone, when our cities are dust and our machines are rust, something will remain. A constant, a ratio, a pattern. The equation will still be there, waiting to be rediscovered, because it cannot be lost. It is what we are. There will come a time when even our monuments crumble, when the steel rusts, the glass collapses, and our satellites fall back to the dust from which they came, and the world will grow quiet again. But somewhere, beneath soil and shadow, a pattern will remain. Ratios buried in architecture, alignments etched into ruins, echoes of the same geometry that once guided us. And if there is anyone left to look, or to listen, they will find it as we have, and remember. Because the universe does not forget. It waits. Every civilization thinks itself the first to awaken, the first to measure, the first to see the order in the sky. And every one of them, in its arrogance, forgets that the pattern was already there. Older than history, older than language, older even than time itself. The ancients built to speak to that pattern. They built not to endure but to echo. And those echoes are what we now call mystery. We call them pyramids, observatories, temples, calendars, but they are something far simpler and far greater. They are memory, the memory of a species that for one fleeting moment in cosmic time understood that it was part of a living equation. We have not lost that knowledge. We have only fallen asleep to it. The stones have waited for us to wake. Look closely, and you will see it everywhere. In the spiral of galaxies, in the orbit of atoms, in the quiet rhythm of your own pulse. The same geometry that built the stars built you. The same pattern that moves the planets moves your mind. You are not outside the equation. You are its continuation. And when you are gone, when we are all gone, the pattern will remain as it always has. Waiting for the next eyes to open. Waiting for the next voice to speak its name, the stones will remember. The universe will remember. And through them, so will we. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.